We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Lots of questions today, but Tom has a hard out before our usual stopping time, so it'll probably just be a little bit of only Rob at the end for questions that probably only Rob was going to mostly respond to anyway. I've tried to rearrange things a little bit and hopefully get to the ones that I really want Tom to reply to.
All your TV setting questions will be at the end.
Yes, that's that type of stuff. NVidia Shield setting questions, which
yes,
that's usually my bag, so I think it's all right if I answer those on my own at the end.
If you hear anything that sounds like a Coke, 2-liter Coke being opened and poured, that's me.
That is
not you.
2-liter Coke being opened and poured. That's what that is.
Coke Zero.
Yeah.
Coke Zero sugar now, because apparently Coke Zero wasn't clear enough for those huddled masses that couldn't quite figure out what the zero was about. They're like, ooh, zero, it must be terrible. No, it is not great, but it's better than Diet Coke, I think.
They still have both. I'm not sure.
They do.
They're slightly different. Coke Zero sugar has more caffeine. That seems to be the only real difference. So,
I think the sweetener that they use is different.
That could be it. I probably like it better because it's probably the same sweetener as Diet Pepsi, which is my preferred one.
Diet Pepsi tastes like liquefied sawdust, and you are a monster for liking it. I would rather not drink anything.
It's the acesulfame potassium. That's what's not in Diet Coke, and I don't know. Maybe there's like one of those genetic things where only some people taste it, a thing in it, like Brussels sprouts. So,
speaking of Brussels sprouts, since you brought it up, little word of wisdom for any of you people out there that are going to a nice restaurant for the first time and you see that they have a whole bunch of stuff on there that you don't recognize, and then they have a hamburger. Okay. Or I guess in Canada, I don't know, moose burger or poutine or something like that. They put that stuff on there for the people who are too afraid to order the good food that are on the menu. Everybody knows that, right? So when I go to restaurants that are nice, that I know are nice, that have good reputations and are expensive and all that stuff, I always try to find a thing on the menu that sounds like I wouldn't eat it if you paid me.
Okay.
Okay. I once went to a restaurant where they had trotter terrine. And trotter is pig's feet.
Oh, okay.
And terrine is usually amalgamation of meats and vegetables that are put into a mold called a terrine, and then it's added with some sort of setting agent, like gelatin or something like that, and then it's sliced like a loaf. All of that sounds awful. So when I saw it, I was like, I'm definitely ordering that. It was the best thing I ate. It was delicious. But this weekend, my wife and I went out because the kids were all out. So we were able to go have a reasonable dinner. So we went to a nicer place, and their signature dish had Brussels sprouts in it. I could smell the Brussels sprouts cooking, and I was gagging because I cannot stand Brussels sprouts. So we ordered it. It was delicious, and the Brussels sprouts were also delicious. They didn't taste anything like they smelled when they were cooking. They tasted good. And then there was the desserts came out, and it was some fruit thing that we weren't going to order anyways because it just sounds like fruit in a bowl, which I can do. Then they had like chocolate cake, and then they had some weird thing that had it was like a donut bread pudding with coconut. My wife's like, I hate coconut. I'm like, I'm getting the coconut thing. I hate coconut as well. The coconut thing was delicious. The chocolate cake, supremely disappointing. So whenever you see something on there that's like, oh, that sounds safe, boring is what it is.
Gotcha.
So there you go. Words of wisdom from Tom for today.
That's right.
All right. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can find us on Twitter, at places, Facebook, YouTube. We're going on. Start with our listeners of the week. We are short on time, so we're going to go fast. Listeners of the week. Become a listener of the week. Support the podcast in some way. You can go to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and send us a PayPal donation. That would be great if you do that. We appreciate it very much. And Chris and Alan did that this week. So Chris and Alan, thank you very much. And Alan is a member of our 2-Hour Plus Club, according to his own self-reporting.
That's right. Yeah, Chris, Alan, thank you both very much for those PayPal donations. Really do appreciate the financial support.
Yes, we do. And including with that financial support, we have our Patreon, patreon.com/AVRant podcast. We have 100 132 patrons currently, including Bertrand. So thank you very much to our 132 patrons.
Yeah, patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Big thanks to our 132 patrons over there. It's the beginning of a new month, and all of those 132 from last week stuck around. So that was really nice, a pleasant surprise. And Bertrand, thank you very much for being one of the 132.
We also got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going. We got one from Chris, who says he's been listening for a couple of years now and really enjoys our approach. So thanks for all the education and entertainment. We have a different Chris who said he found a like-new Panasonic UB420 Ultra HD Blu-ray player for $140. That's less than the brand new UB150, which currently I did not know existed until just a second. So that was a no-brainer. And he's happy. John, who says, keep up the great work, and also tried to give us a movie code, but it was from the UK, so we couldn't use it.
Yeah.
But we tried. Thank you very much, John. And Brad and Bertrand. Bertrand started his own podcast called Design Quebec. It is in French, so as far as we're concerned, it's brilliant. At least I am, because I have no idea what they're saying. And it's all about photo, graphic, and website design. It is monthly, and he says, I can now admire you even more for keeping up a weekly show. It gets easier as you go, dude. So that's notes of gratitude from Chris, John, Brad, and Bertrand. Thank you very much.
I'll repeat the names: Chris T, Chris H, John, and John, extra special thanks for attempting to give us that movie code. But region locked, that's how things work. Brad and Bertrand. Bertrand, congrats on launching your own podcast. That is great. And it's always fun when people get into it and they're like, oh, that's what goes on behind the scenes. It is certainly an educational process as you go through it all. So that's wonderful. Thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. It's wonderful to have the encouragement. And just before we hop into the news, should mention Tom did appear last week on DJ's Brightside Home Theater podcast. They discussed The Crow. Yeah. Which guy? The guy you talked to for like 3 hours on and off the air until your computer died?
No, I don't remember that either. I'm pretty sure that was he just had some sort of, he AI'd my voice.
That's right. But aside from talking about The Crow, it's a good one to listen to because Tom goes into some of the origin of AVRant, and it was actually lined up with like the HT guys just did an origin of HT guys last week. So
oh, really? I don't remember talking about that either.
That was just kismet. That all fit together. And then we have our second annual Thanksgiving show coming up where DJ Lee, who occasionally guest hosts on our podcast, and the HT guys, Ara and Braden over there. All six of us are going to get together once again, have a Thanksgiving episode. It's not going to be as long as last year, or at least that's the goal, but we're definitely trying.
That's what they
say. We do want to answer at least one question, and since we're the question podcast, we figure our listeners will have a question. Please mark it on your email. Once again, question@avrant.com is the place to send it, but mark it on your email that it's for the Thanksgiving episode and make it something where the idea is that you would love all six of us to weigh in on. It's something that Tom and I wouldn't just answer on our own, or you wouldn't want just our answers where you want all six people weighing in. If you send in a question and we don't get to it, because we're probably going to only answer one or two, trying to keep the runtime down, please do not be discouraged. Send in those questions anyway. We're going to pick at least one, and all six of us will weigh in on the Thanksgiving episode this year. There we go.
That's right. There we go. Thanksgiving episode, which I don't remember agreeing to, but I'm sure.
We've got the email proof that you did.
That DJ guy probably spoofed my email, my IP address, the whole thing.
Could be.
He's an untrustworthy person. Shouldn't listen to anything he says. All right, in the news, Monoprice has introduced their V2 versions of the Monolith 10, 12, and 15 subs. So those of you who are like, woohoo, Monoprice subs are cheaper than SBS subs. Prices have gone up $50 or $60 for the 15-incher. So now it's $550 for the 10-inch, $850 for the 12-inch, and $1,400 for the 15-inch. So they're going up a little bit. I think everybody's prices are going up. I think just consider prices are going up.
Yeah.
But hopefully, wages will also go up.
But these are still less expensive than SVS's prices now. So these are still the value leaders. And for the short time that they're still going to be around, there's news on the outgoing V1 models.
Right, the V1s are on sale to clear out the remaining stock, so you might want to pounce. $420 for the 10-inch, $650 for the 12, and $1,000 for the 15. New V2 versions list identical specs, but they have new cabinets and slightly different driver designs and mounting. They've made the cabinets a little bit taller, but not quite as deep. So I actually prefer that. And they've got rounded edges to match the looks of the THX Ultra 13 and 16, which are $1,600 and $2,300 respectively. They were introduced about a month ago, and the woofers are flush mounted now instead of protruding a bit like they did on the V1 models. So I I will say the number one thing I liked about these things is that the stupid 10-inch one doesn't have an offset single port.
Oh, right.
That offset it is single port on the SVS.
Right. Originally, that
1000,
was the
whatever it was.
The PB10 NSD. NSD had the offset port. Yeah.
Oh God, it just broke my brain to look at the stupid thing. I just hated it so much. But you couldn't say anything bad about the sub. It's like somebody, when you have a child and you look at your own child and you're like, wow, we're gonna have to do something about that nose. You know what I mean? I feel like you're just like you save for college and you save for the nose fund.
Right.
You just know it's coming, and that's the way I felt about that SVS thing. I loved it because it was a great sub, but that stupid port was stupid. So I'm glad that their port is centered.
Well, yeah, the new Monolith V2 subs, they do look nicer, I will say. These are ones I might use without the grill on. So yeah, the 10-inch does have the single port in the middle. The 12-inch has the 2 ports, and then the 15-inch has 3 ports. So it's quite easy to visually tell them apart.
They're still heavy, though.
Oh, they're still big. They're still heavy. There's no question. They're still black. No other color options.
The 10-inch is like 72 pounds.
Yeah, that's right.
So these are not, and that's the small one. So they're going to go up from there. Yeah, one thing that you're not going to save money on is shipping when it comes to these Monoprice subs.
But at least, $550. So yes, the price went up. There's no longer a $500 model, but that's $150 less than the entry-level ported model that SVS is selling now. So that's significant if you're looking for something that can genuinely hit down to 20 hertz for about the lowest price. They certainly don't think that's unreasonable for what they're offering there. Performance-wise,
they're
looks-wise
saying
now.
17. 17 is what they can hit. Minus 3 or 6 or something like that?
Minus 6 is 17 hertz. Yeah, very capable. So yeah, those Monolith subs definitely still up there. Anybody looking to fill a large space for some of the lowest prices that you can get on subs like that. Impressive.
I read all that. All right, from Karl. 2 months ago, Locast, the not-for-profit service that let you watch local TV broadcast via the internet, lost its legal battle with the major TV broadcasters, as does everybody, because they have all the money and the lawyers. And they had to suspend all service. Now they have shut down for good, but that's not all. They've also been ordered to pay $32 million in copyright damages to ABC, CBS, Fox, and NBC. Well, good luck squeezing the blood from that stone.
That's... Seems punitive, but I don't know all the ins and outs of the case. But I mean, I thought that their little workaround loophole that they had tried to operate within seemed reasonable, but obviously the judges in these cases disagree with what someone looking in from the outside thought about things. And so not only are they shut down now, they are paying $32 million in damages. I have lost Tom's Skype connection. I don't know if he's speaking right now. Okay, well, I might have to... Okay, we're going to close down Tom's Skype call here. Hold on while I transition over to an image so that we're not just looking at that. And let me give Tom a call back and see if we can reconnect here. Sorry, folks. We're not going to cut and edit while we do this. We'll just... see if we can get it working on the fly here. Okay, Tom has picked up the call. His camera
I don't know what
back.
happened.
There we go. Well,
no, it wasn't the camera. Skype just closed.
Yep, that's what happened.
So I've got the new Windows. What is it now? 11, 12?
Oh,
11.
fun.
I just updated. So we just have to assume that everything's broken.
I purposely did not update. I'm not touching that thing for probably a year.
Oh, no. Oh, no, it's still going. Okay.
Your audio recording?
Yeah, it's still okay. Our recording's still going.
Good. Okay. Well, we're on to comments now.
All right. Paul just wanted to share a few thoughts. He got an Apple TV 4K on their device, and even though his LG OLED has all the apps he needs built in. So he got that because we told him that the apps were better. The Apple TV got rid of the jitter that was bugging him, and its frame rate switching actually works, so he couldn't be happier, and he ended up buying an Apple TV 4K for every TV in his home.
Yeah.
There you go.
Wow, that lip sync on Skype itself is so far off that this is going to be a fun video. But anyway, Paul, very glad that you are happy with your Apple TV 4K purchase. And certainly the judder part of things, that is the automatic frame rate switching. That is sort of my number one reason for anybody who cares about that, why the Apple TV 4K is still my top choice for almost all streaming services.
Yeah, I would... as convenient it is to have the Xbox to do everything, because it does everything, I would give it up in a second, to be honest with you, just for something that gave me the audio that I wanted, regardless of what video I wanted. You know what I mean? I just cannot get over the fact that Microsoft cannot get the audio right with the stream. I just can't get over the fact that they can't seem to figure this out. Drives me absolutely bonkers. And it feels like such a little thing. It feels like you could send a team of people, 3 or 4 engineers, and say, fix the audio, please. And like 2 weeks later, it would be fixed.
The bitstream pass-through isn't working for you?
It doesn't work.
Fun.
It doesn't work. Well, and not only that, the apps, like Netflix and stuff like that, doesn't give you Atmos if you're not streaming 4K at the same time, and I'm not streaming 4K.
Yeah, right.
I just fix it. Just make it work. Just give me the good audio, regardless if I can do it, and give me the good video if I can do it, and if I can do both, give me both. How hard is that? Anyways, Paul was using Plex, not just for his movies and TV shows, but also for the Plex DVR to record over-the-air broadcasts. The thing is, you have to wait for a recording to be completed before you can watch it. You can't join a live TV show in progress, but the Apple TV can run the Channels DVR app, and Plex and Channels can share the same library. So that's working out great. Still Plex for movies, but the Channels DVR app for live TV recordings.
Yeah.
And much like Lee, Paul recently got a Tesla. Lee got a Tesla?
Oh, yeah.
You
weren't aware of Lee's Tesla?
No, I must have missed it.
All he talks about.
Well, I must have missed it in the. I sometimes silence Lee on Facebook because of all the Alabama football crap that he posts. So, anyways, Paul says it's like a little car theater in there. It has built-in apps built in for Netflix, Disney Plus, and a few others, and you can see why Lee likes it so much. How could that possibly be distracting?
Right.
Why?
I'm pretty sure you can't do it unless you're in park, but
I have no idea. So he's getting a head start. Happy birthday to Tom, 2022. Woohoo! Thank you. I won't remember, but thank you anyways. And now Tom can't complain that nobody said it until after his birthday. That's fine too.
Well in advance.
Weldon, speaking of Weldon appreciated our recent advice about DIY absorption panel materials. He asked a follow-up question via email about panel thickness, so that's a good opportunity to link back to where we talked about that in episode 761, which includes a link to the handy website, acousticmodeling.com. Check out the show notes for those links.
That's right, yeah. Rather than going through literally exactly what we said in that episode again, to me that was recent enough that, and the information has definitely not changed on that, but it is a great reminder because I don't always remember acousticmodeling.com, and that is a very handy place to be able to go. You can, it's all in millimeters, but you can do the conversion to inches if that is the thicknesses in which you think. So yeah, you can enter the thickness of the insulation and the thickness of the air gap behind that insulation and see a graph, a chart of what should actually be happening acoustics-wise. So that is very handy to visualize things that way. And yeah, you can listen back through our response in episode 761 to get all the details. We'll have the links in the show notes.
Karl wanted to share a couple of pictures from his recent trip to the only THX Ultimate Cinema in North America at the Regency Westwood Village Theater. He says it was stunning, a jaw-dropping experience, although there were a couple of issues, but he didn't go into details just yet. So, all right, the screen already looks too small to me. He must be at the very back of the theater.
Oh, not him. He'd be sitting very close to the front.
No, when he took this picture.
Oh, when he took the picture,
he must be at the very. He just walked in, took the picture, and then these were all the seats. These people who are sitting right here and like 3 rows up are too far back. They need to move close. But yeah, I believe I have been to this theater before.
Yeah, a lot of the big red carpet premieres are done at this theater in California, so that's very nice looking on the inside. You can certainly tell it's an Atmos setup. You can see these speakers hanging down from the rather ornate ceiling, which clearly was not designed originally with speakers hanging down in mind.
With Atmos in mind? No.
It has been retrofit since then, and yeah, the big entrance on the outside there is pretty well known. So there we go. That was nice. Happy you had a fun time. Theater.
There was a dude with a piano up front.
Right.
All right, questions. Derek was all set to go with his Ascend HGM 200 SE speakers, but unfortunately Ascend informed him that they are out of stock. and waiting on a new batch of cabinets to come in. They won't be available to ship until the new year. And Derek was really hoping to put his system together before then. So, still looking for speakers in the $300 price range with about the ELAC Debut 2.0, or maybe go back to considering the inexpensive Yamos Studio S series that started this whole process. Any other alternatives we would recommend? I mean, the ELACs should be fine. Yeah, the ELAC. I mean, if you can get the ELACs, I think the ELACs would be fine. I feel like the Ascends might be slightly better, but they're equivalent. I know you don't want to wait, but there's some part of you that's going to always wonder if you compromised to get anything other than the ELACs.
Well, I'm pretty sure I got a little spoiler alert email-wise, which was that he's strongly considering going with one of the other bookshelf models that is in stock just for the front three, and then he can add, because he actually kind of needs the design of the HTM 200s for his surrounds and surround backs, but he's like, for the surrounds and surround backs, I can wait until January.
Sure.
The front three is going to make the biggest difference. So I am totally on board with that idea because, say, 3 CBM 170s, or even if you want to get like a pair of CBM 170s and the larger CMT 340 center, like as long as it's within budget, those will match very nicely with HTM 200 SEs as your surrounds and backs. So I'm still in favor of that. And via email, he seemed like this was just recently, he seemed like he's pretty on board with that idea. I agree the ELAC Debut 2.0 are good value entry-level speakers. In fact, I'd say they're better than entry-level, to be honest. Yeah. But in ELAC's lineup, they're the entry-level. And
right.
Yeah.
They're entry-level. I feel like they're entry-level speakers for people who aren't afraid to spend money on speakers. Yeah. Like, you can get cheaper speakers out there that I would still consider to be entry-level, but those are better than those.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
My one little qualm with the ELAC Debut 2.0 is I am not a particular fan of, I believe there's 2 center speaker models in the Debut 2.0 lineup, and I'm not the biggest fan of the center speakers, if you're using them horizontally as intended.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the centers. So for that one reason, the other thing about the ELAC Debut 2.0, I wouldn't put this in the con section, it's just something to be aware of. They purposely have some high frequency roll off. As I mentioned before, that can be a very beneficial design choice because when you're using a little bit lower priced pieces inside there, the tweeter in particular, having an intentional high frequency roll off can make sure it never sounds harsh, never sounds grating, and it gives you a wider sweet spot. So I don't consider that a con, but it's just something to be aware of. But as for other alternatives, like I'll go back to when Derek first asked this question a number of weeks ago. I mentioned the HDM 200 SEs, and then the other one were HSUs, horn loaded speakers, the HB1 Mark II, which is right in that price range, and then the HC1 Mark II center to go along with it. And I would still stand by those. I think those are still very good. I mean, they're a little bit more than $300 per pair, but they're right in that sort of price range. One other potential one to consider is Paradigm, their Monitor SE series. Crutchfield is carrying them in the States now, so you can order them online through Crutchfield. So it's the Monitor SE Atom is the bookshelf model, and then the Monitor SE 2000C is the center channel model. And that one, they didn't just put tweeter, woofer all in a line. They elevated the tweeter in between the two woofers to help a little bit with the comb filtering and some of the lobing that can happen in that crossover region between tweeter and woofers. So, again, I'm not a gigantic fan of the Monitor SE series. I feel like Paradigm tried to maybe go a little too entry level with the Monitor series. But as far as $300 per pair of speakers go, these are still ones that, if nothing else, very, very uniform, even dispersion, which means that some of the little niggles I have about their frequency response can be EQ'd very effectively. So that's one that you might consider and is available at Crutchfield right now.
Yeah. I will say, if I know that this doesn't apply for your current room, but the HSUs, if you do go with the horn-loaded ones that they have, they're pretty efficient, which means that you will have the ability to say later on, if you upgrade, they'll be much more viable in a larger range of placement options.
Room sizes.
Yeah, if you decide you're like, okay, well, I don't need them in my theater anymore, but I was going to put something in my living room for just to have some background music and maybe sometimes to play something a little bit louder, or maybe even take them outside. Those would work a lot better in those situations because of how sensitive they are.
And if you get into a really big room in the future, they have their even larger CCB8s. So if you end up adding 3 of those up front and convert the HB1 Mark IIs into your surrounds or something like that, that could work out as well.
Right. All right. Derek's room is 12 feet wide, 18 feet long, 7 feet high. Is that too small for 2 rows of seats? And is it too small for a 7.2.4 configuration? You can't have both of those things for sure. Okay, you can have one or the other.
Well, I mean, you can
put the speakers back there, but they're going to be literally sitting on somebody's head. Your back row is going to be on the back wall.
Yeah, the back row, if you did 2 rows, is not going to get a fantastic experience. But you could do both of these things, and I would say 18 by 12 by 7. That's large enough that if for your primary row, the front row, you can have a good 7.2.4 experience. I think that's totally doable in here, depending on screen size and placement and that. Like if you're willing to do the thing where your primary row is actually in the front half of this room, like 8 feet from the screen that is mounted right on the front wall. If you're willing to do that, then yeah, you've got enough space to do things that way. If it's more like I'd rather have my primary row seats within the back half of the theater, 10 feet or more away, and I want to have a projection screen up front, if that's the idea, then your back row is going to end up right on the back wall, and they're not going to have a fantastic experience, probably full stop, and particularly not if you put surround back speakers literally right behind people's heads. So yeah, a little bit depends on how you're laying it out.
So he tends to use an 85-inch TV, and when he goes to the movie theater, he likes to sit 2/3 of the way into the theater, away from the screen or towards the screen?
Yeah, no, the prime 2/3 from the front, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Would sitting 11 feet from eyes to screen be too far back for a similar field of view?
From an 85-inch, yeah.
Yeah, from an 85-inch. I sit... I'm just beyond dead center of my room. I think I measured it the other day. I think I measured it from my center channel, and I was like 9.5 feet. So you can add. Okay. I'm probably pretty close to 11 feet from my screen. Okay. And I'm got a 92, and it's just right for me.
And even that is a little bit on the smaller side. That's more towards a 41-degree field of view-ish from that sort of distance. If you like the prime 2/3 of the way into the theater seat, then
Which is where I sit.
Yeah, but you like about a 45-degree field of view. That's more or less what you're aiming for at that sort of seating distance from like a THX reference size theater. So 85 inches to get that same. Actually, there's almost a easy shorthand you can do with the screen sizes that we're working with these days, which is like if you take a 65, then if you sit 5.5 feet from that eyes to screen, you'll have a 45-degree field of view, or really close to it. If you have a 75-inch screen, you sit 6.5 feet away from it, you'll have a 45-degree. So 85, you're sitting 7.5 feet away from an 85-inch screen to get like really close to a 45-degree field of view. So actually, if your intention is to have the 85-inch television, which I'm all for, I love that we have these really quite affordable 85-inch flat panels now, and you don't have to have it in a bat cave anymore, and you can still have fantastic black levels and contrast and color. If that's what you're going for, and you want the 45-degree field of view, well, now, what I just mentioned in that previous question, you could sit with your primary row within the front half of your theater, right? About 8 feet away from the screen.
Yeah.
And you're going to have a really nice experience there. That leaves you 9-10 feet behind you now. You could have that second row without the second row being physically right on the back wall. You could still have 2 or 3 feet behind the second row this way. So I'm really quite in favor of it. It's just a matter of, if what you envisioned was I'm going to sit about 2/3 of the way into my theater, my home theater, well, we're not doing that anymore while retaining the field of view that you want with an 85-inch and forcing the second row of seats all the way, snug to the back wall. But I'm good with the idea of moving everything forward, sitting close to that screen. You'll still get the field of view you want, and 8 feet is pretty comfortable. I think that's nice.
Yeah. Raul in Mexico. Raul has a has been using an old office projector, a 1080p Acer model. The image quality has never been great, but he was able to cast a 120-inch image, and that part was nice. Its bulb is noticeably dim now, and the only replacement lamps he can find appear to be Chinese knockoffs. He doesn't trust them, even for only $100. He's had a look at an LG A1 OLED. Obviously, the size is much smaller, but the image looks very good, and he could just move a seat much closer. The problem is he really can't spend more than $1,000 US, and for an OLED in Mexico, that would limit him to the 48-inch size, and that's a bit too small. Not if you mount it directly to your face,
Right.
Like think of it like an Oculus Quest headset, but it's just a little bit further away.
Well, that shorthand I just mentioned, you want to be about 4 feet from a 48-inch to get the feel. That is pretty darn close. That's like not quite computer monitor 2 feet from your face, but maybe lean back and put your computer monitor on the wall in front of you instead of your desk, and there you are, 4 feet away from it. Yeah, and just for the conversion, $1,000 is about 20,000 Mexican pesos right now, so it's right about that if you're looking up the prices.
So searching around for the TCL 6 series and the 65-inch size fits his budget, but what do we think? What option should he choose, including the option of maybe just taking a gamble on the $100 replacement lamp? That's certainly the cheapest. Well, it doesn't sound like you were super duper happy with your image to begin with.
Yeah.
So I'm loath to tell you to buy another bulb and then spend another 10,000 hours or 9,000 hours with it, or however long those things last.
Oh,
so
more like 3,000 or 4,000 hours on a lamp.
So that I'm sure that OLED looked great, but if you can't afford it and it's out of the budget, then 48 inches is just too small. So you're going to need something bigger. It seems like there's got to be a projector option out there. You've already got the whole screen set up and everything. It seems like there should be a projector option out there. For $1,000, I mean, if you're just going to rock 1080p like you have been anyways,
right,
I'm sure you can find it.
Which you definitely can. Like I could check Amazon Mexico and see their prices. The thing is, in that price range, the one I would almost certainly be pointing you to would be Optima's HD 146X. That is definitely a better projector than the Acer that you're using right now. Much more color accurate, better contrast, all of those types of things. But it is still 1080p. And I'm wondering if part of what he wanted to upgrade was to get 4K and HDR, because of course those are nice things that you can get on a $1,000 65-inch flat panel these days. And you wouldn't be able to get that in a projector. There are some that are up around 30,000 pesos, around $1,500. That is doable, but he was saying the budget is pretty much set at right around this $1,000, 20,000 pesos type of budget that he's got right now. So I could point you to that Optima HD 146X. It is available. It's less than your budget, but you're not getting a resolution upgrade. You're not getting HDR with that. It's sticking with 1080p. So in terms of a 65-inch flat panel, and that is about as big as you could go with something I would still recommend. There are some 75-inch flat panels close to that price range, but they're not something I'd be happy recommending. I don't think they're worth the money. They don't look that great. The TCL 6 series is definitely one that you could consider. If that's in your budget and the 65-inch, he was looking at the R635. The only thing I'll mention about that one is that it is not HDMI 2.1. If you wanted all the very latest gaming features, it doesn't quite have that. It actually can do gaming at 120 hertz, but at 1080p resolution. 1080p 120 is what the R635 from TCL can do. So it can't quite do all the HDMI 2.1 stuff. There is a model available really close to your budget that does have all the HDMI 2.1 gaming features, and that would be Hisense's U7G. And the U7G is a darn impressive television.
The thing about Hisense, and I've been wanting to pick your brain about this as well, is that I've been seeing a lot of conflicting reviews from both users and professionals. So what is your take on the Hisense new lineup? They're all U's, right? They're U7, U6.
Unfortunately, that messes things up a bit because, of course, a lot of times in the customer reviews, like people just refer to the brand as though whatever specific model they bought represents the entire brand no matter what.
Sure.
And that just isn't the case. The U7G, specifically U7G, is the unicorn out of their lineup. because they have the more expensive U8G, which they kind of messed up the HDR on it. They just tried to make it as bright as they possibly could, and it isn't accurate anymore. And they just went for crazy brightness, but not accuracy at all. The U6G is not a particularly good television. The U7G sits right in the middle and gets almost everything right. Now, I mean, I don't know what the situation is customer service-wise with Hisense in Mexico. I know there are people who've had complaints about their customer service if something goes wrong. Well. So, I'm just putting it out there simply because it is this sort of unicorn model in Hisense's lineup this year that has all the HDMI 2.1 gaming features. If you aren't worried about that, you know what? Playing games at 4K 60 hertz is not the end of the world. Instead of 4K 120. In fact, you get the better graphical flourishes if you leave it at 60 hertz. Right. So if you're good with that, I agree with your initial choice of the TCL 6 series, the R635. I think that's a really good one to go for. I only mentioned the Hisense U7G because of HDMI 2.1 gaming features. That's the only
I'll be honest with you. I'm very much now leaning towards not recommending people or recommending to people that they just don't worry about VRR and ALLM and all that stuff. I just don't think it applies to many people, and even the people that it actually apply, people who actually own a console game, have a HDMI 2.1 receiver, care about all the things. I don't think they'll actually notice all that much.
Well, I mean, like the TCL
4K 60, 460, 120.
The TCL R635, it can do VRR just up to 60 hertz, not up to 120. Right. There is the newer R646. That one's just come out, and that has all the HDMI 2.1 features, but it's above this budget. It went up a fair amount above this budget. So, I mean, I think hopefully that what we talked about there will let you determine. But ultimately, you were probably pretty spot on with your initial leaning towards the R635 from TCL. I can definitely agree with that choice.
There you go. David, the distance from David's equipment rack to his 77-inch OLED is about 32 feet. He's got multiple Cat6 Ethernet cables already run, so he's been using a Monoprice HDBaseT extension kit. It works for 4K, even up to 444 signals, but it doesn't support Dolby Vision. Of course, it doesn't support HDMI 2.1 bandwidth. He's not too worried about the HDMI 2.1 part yet, but he'd like to get Dolby Vision working, and he's tried running a temporary HDMI cable, and Dolby Vision definitely works from his sources on his OLED, but running a new HDMI cable inside the walls would be a hassle, and since the Ethernet cables are already there, what's his best option for getting Dolby Vision working that way? I don't know. Why didn't you put this one at the end? I don't know anything.
Well, because it was from last week, and I wanted to get last week's questions answered because we mentioned that we would. I don't know if you can buy the first one I'm going to mention on their website. This is from Emotiva. They have Emotiva eConnects, which is an HDBaseT system. They specify 18 gigabits per second, so it is not HDMI 2.1, and they explicitly mention supporting Dolby Vision. But on their website, it says closeout. And if you actually click on the link, it says discontinued and there's no add to cart option. You could try calling them because, like I say, it does mention closeout as opposed to completely gone, but I don't know if they still have any to sell you. The only reason I bring it up is because it's the least expensive option for HDBaseT that does all the stuff you want. It's $190. Now, the one that you definitely can buy, and it mentions right in its manual that it supports Dolby Vision, is from Monoprice, from Blackbird, just like you have. It's just the current one. You've got an older one that didn't support Dolby Vision. The current one does. It is the 41097. 41097 is the specific model. Again, it's 18 gigabits per second, but they do say right in the manual specifically that it does support Dolby Vision. In fact, they also mention it supports HDR10 Plus and HLG. So every flavor.
I feel like this running an HDMI cable will be cheaper than all of this.
Well, it will be because that Monoprice Blackbird one is $255.
That is pricey.
It's a little pricey to do this now. Interestingly, over at Monoprice, I've mentioned before, once you go above, let's see, there's 16 feet, and I'm pretty sure the Zeskit ones over at Amazon now go up to 23 feet. I think that's the longest you can get, but he needed longer than that. And previously, you had to go over to Monoprice's, or not specifically Monoprice, but you had to go fiber optic. If you wanted to go longer than 16 feet in most cases, you had to go fiber optic, and those were like over $100. But Monoprice has recently just introduced a new SlimRun series, and these are fully certified. These are ultra high speed certified active HDMI cables. So these are active ones. They actually do mention that they are fiber optic anyway, but $75 gets you the exactly 32-foot length that you said you needed. That happens to be the length of it is 32 feet for $75. So clearly that is the least expensive in terms of what you're purchasing, but then if you're having to run it inside the walls, I'm not exactly sure the situation you're in, how much hassle that'll be worth. But that gets you certified HDMI 2.1 and for the lowest price of what you're actually purchasing. And I love that it exists now because now we have some in-between links. You don't have to go to the crazy long fiber optic links just to go beyond 16 feet. They have these more reasonable in-between links at more reasonable in-between prices from Monoprice SlimRun. So I'm very happy about that.
Charles says he has custom installation background. He has a custom installation background. He knows firsthand how difficult it can be to recommend the perfect solution, so he likes the way we tailor our answers as best we can. Like many installers, his home theater is overdue, probably long overdue, for some upgrades. Most of his gear is over 10 years old at this point, but he did upgrade to a 77-inch OLED last year, and a new receiver is next. He's just waiting for the HDMI 2.1 situation to settle properly.
Yeah. So are we. It's
everybody.
It's getting there. Getting close now.
If you don't mind an entry-level receiver, it has settled.
Right.
I don't even really call the 1700, the Denon X1700 a mid-level receiver. It really isn't, in my opinion. But
it's certainly the entry of the X series. No question about that.
Yeah. So his room is in the basement and is roughly 15 by 16. So a cube. Everything is pushed over to the right-hand side a bit, though, so his couch is close to the right wall, not centered within the room. He has DefTech BP7004 bipole speakers with CLR 2300 center up front. His surrounds and surround backs are different brands, Boston Acoustics and B&W. Customers had like extra speakers and went, wow, I don't want these. They are installed about a foot above his seated ear height, and he can notice the timbre mismatch compared to his fronts. I could guess so, between B&W
definitely
and
the B&Ws. That doesn't surprise
Boston
me.
Acoustics. We got Boston Acoustics trying to be flat, B&W doing their thing, DefTech doing their thing. Mm-hmm. He just wanted to double check if we think he should jump on a deal. $125 a pair for some DefTech Pro Monitor 1000 speakers that he could use as new surrounds and surround backs. He also still has a pair of DefTech Bipole BP 1.2X.
That's the model name. Don't blame me. That's the model name.
It hurts my soul that somebody wrote that down and went, nailed it.
Yep.
Nailed it.
This will look great in copy. No confusion.
He'd appreciate a closer timbre match to his front tower. So what's our opinion on the Pro Monitor 1000? Is there a better solution we would point to instead? I'm getting the impression that he doesn't want to separate from his DefTechs to begin with.
He doesn't. He wants to keep the fronts that he has. He is not interested in going down to 5. He specified that in his email. He wants 7. So it's basically, are these Pro Monitor 1000s from DefTech going to give him the timbre match that he wants in the surround and potentially both the surround and surround back positions? Any inklings on that?
Let me look up these.
Okay. I mean, they are the bipole towers. His towers are the bipole towers where they have the exact complement of drivers on the front and the back of the speaker firing in phase with one another. And my take, my experience with DefTech's bipole towers is that it might be the one instance where I think the correct surround speakers to use are another pair of DefTech bipole towers. Like, I pretty much never want to use towers as my surround speakers, but this might be the one instance where that's about the only way to get a timbre match to these things, because they just don't sound like other speakers, which is their whole selling point, is that they don't sound like other speakers, but they are tricky to match. In fact, I'm a little surprised if their direct firing CLR 2300 center actually perfectly timbre matches the bipole towers, because that is not a bipole center. And I've had that experience with DefTech bipole towers where, just panning across the front three speakers is not a perfect timbre match, even when you're careful with the setup. So my inclination, I'm not sure why exactly he ever went away from the bipole surround speakers in the first place.
Right.
Now, I think I'm recalling he might have mentioned in his email that it's the whole Atmos and Dolby recommendation thing where they're like, use direct firing speakers now. That's what we want you to do.
Right.
But honestly, I would go back to those as the surrounds. I would go back to the bipole surrounds. In terms of the surround backs, my first inclination is, as surround backs, are the Bostons really that far off? I could see the B&Ws being a pretty noticeable timbre mismatch.
Right.
That wouldn't surprise me at all. And if that's the only two pairs of speakers you have, I could see all of that being noticeable. But I'm like, are the Bostons really, as surround backs, are they really noticeable? Because that's my first inclination, is just use the Bostons as surround backs and put your bipole DefTech surround speakers back into service as your side surrounds. If you don't, $125, that's pretty cheap for a pair of DefTech Pro monitors. The Pro monitors, to me, don't timbre match their bipole speakers. I don't think they do. I don't particularly think there's a great match for DefTech bipoles other than more DefTech bipoles. So maybe the solution is to find a used pair of the bipole BP 1.2X surrounds so that you have 4 of those in service. And to me, that would be kind of what I would aim for. But I mean, for $125, I'd be willing to just take a flyer on them and give them a try. Certainly as the surround backs, I don't foresee them being a problem as the surround backs. That's my
take. They're like usually they're on Amazon right now, $250 a pop. So they're definitely
this is definitely a quarter of the price, right? Quarter of the price.
Boy, I really wish I could talk you out of these DefTechs. I'll be honest with you.
You mean at the front? You're not talking about the Pro monitors.
I'm talking about the front. Yeah, I really wish I could talk you out of the DefTechs, because my sense would be sell all the DefTechs, sell the B&Ws, keep the Boston Acoustics, buy RBH or literally almost any of the speaker brands that we recommend, and go with that. But if you're just loving the DefTechs and you want to keep those things, try a Phantom Center.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on board with that.
just to see
how
you don't have to keep it, but try the Phantom Center with just you and listening to some 5.1 music if you can, or maybe music that's being mixed into 5.1, and then listen to it without the center and with the center sort of thing. Just to see how that sounds. And then, like Rob said, I would put the bipoles back in on the sides, put the Bostons at the back, sell the B&Ws, because they don't really have anything to do here. I would imagine that those Bostons at the back won't be too bad.
Yeah.
I know that Dolby and everybody else is, direct firing speakers, because we want to do this. Okay. They're not the boss of you.
Right.
All right. And it's not really nearly as important as they're making it sound. I mean, I think that the differences are, it depends on how your bipole, you have bipole speakers, so there's that going on. It's not like they're dipoles. And then, it depends on how diffuse they really are. And even then, does it really matter if you can totally 100% pinpoint because of the speaker or not?
You are definitely going to be able to tell it's coming from either the left or the right-hand side. There's no problem.
And isn't that enough?
Yeah.
It's either the left. You really need quadrants. Really? Yeah. You don't need the whole thing. You just need to go, is it directly to my side? Is it a little bit to my side, but also a little bit back? Is it directly behind me? Is it, and then you can go from there. But that's the way I would go.
All right.
That's the way I would go. It's just similar to what Rob has said, I guess. Karl was asked by one of his students which location has the largest Dolby Cinema screen.
So this is specifically a Dolby Cinema, their whole Dolby thing. It'll be Dolby Atmos. It'll be Dolby Vision. It's the only way you can watch Dolby Vision at an actual cinema. So this is a Dolby Cinema, their own branded.
Has there anybody ever taken an IMAX screen and played Dolby decoded stuff on it? Because I mean, doesn't the IMAX screens now have overhead speakers as well, right?
They do. IMAX has their own format. The IMAX with laser theaters have their own format. Now, theirs is a channel-based format. It is not object-based audio. It is a 12.1 channel-based, or in fact, I think it's genuine 12.2. I think they actually separate the bass in the front and the back of the room. But it's a channel-based system that IMAX uses. But we're not talking about that. We're talking Dolby Cinema. Where are the largest Dolby Cinema screens?
I don't know.
I don't actually know either. I wasn't able to easily Google this and find a definitive answer. I can tell you that, is it Leicester? Is that how you pronounce it? Leicester Square in the UK?
You're asking me how to pronounce something? You're really desperate for a mispronunciation if you're asking me.
I'm sure that's
definitely not
a
right.
reasonable, North Americanized accent of it. I'm sure our listeners in the UK are cringing at it, but hopefully you have some idea what we're talking about. That is definitely the largest Dolby Cinema in the UK. That one was clear. And then the Disney Springs at Disney World Dolby Cinema location seems to be the largest in the US. But there are a bunch of Dolby Cinemas in China, and I couldn't find information on those, and it wouldn't shock me if one of them in China is actually the largest in the world, and I have no idea if that's the case or not. So that was about all I could find.
What would be the draw to being in the largest cinema screen in the world? Because I still want it to have the same relative, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
I'm just going to sit further back.
That's right. I don't know. It was just a question of curiosity. Apparently, Karl wasn't able to easily Google the answer any more than I was, so wondered if we happen to know. That was the best information I could come up with. Sorry.
There you go. All right. I just clicked off for some reason. Here we go. Chad, a while back, someone, not sure if it was Chad back then, asked how to fast forward and skip more easily in Plex on an NVIDIA Shield. Rob said the easiest thing to do was use the voice command, so Chad has been doing that, and it's been great. Because you could say, skip to 56 minutes, and it would go straight there. Mm-hmm. But now there's been an update, and when he gives the name, that same sort of voice command, he just gets a message saying, sorry, I can't do that in this app. So what's the best way now? I don't know.
So I tried this on now, I have to caveat this, I am currently using an NVIDIA Shield Pro, and I don't know if Chad is still using the 2017 NVIDIA Shield. Might be. I have one of those, but it's in storage at this point, and I didn't dig it back out to test it and run through all the updates that would take a while to do because I haven't used it in a long time. I was not able to replicate this issue on my NVIDIA Shield Pro. When I did the voice commands, the skipping forward to the exact timestamp that I said with my voice, that worked. You could try just saying skip forward X minutes, skip forward 13 minutes, skip forward 18 minutes and 23 seconds, rather than saying go to this specific time. Sometimes the skip forward by amount command works better than the skip forward to this exact time. You could give that a try, but I suspect it's not either of those things. There's a couple of things that none of them are super fun. One of them is it could potentially be on the Plex server side, which is you might need to go back through and just let it run its update metadata thing, because sometimes when a little bit of that gets out of sync, because it actually does sort of like go through all your videos, and like that's how it generates the automatic thumbnails and things like that. And if none of that has been updated on the regular, that might be some of the issue. But more likely than that, to be honest, you might just have to uninstall the Plex app and reinstall it, which that's a hassle. That's a hassle.
Try turning it off and turning it back on.
It's a little bit more.
I'll be honest with you. My Echo Dot no longer connects securely to my speaker.
Yeah.
Like the Bluetooth drops in and out like crazy. It's driving my wife up the wall because she likes to listen to music on it, specifically Hamilton. I mean, I've listened to Hamilton, at least the first 5 or 6 songs, millions of times now, but it just cuts in and out constantly, and she can't stand it. So we're probably going to switch to the Google thingy.
There's a couple other things if you do happen to still be using the 2017 NVIDIA Shield for Chad that are definitely worth checking, because they're much easier than either of the two things I just said, which is, one, the battery in that thing is not rechargeable and not easily replaceable. It's a stupid coin battery that they put in the 2017 NVIDIA Shield remote. try replacing the battery, because sometimes that's all it is. And
it could be that too.
You might have to literally look up how to open that remote, because it's not the easiest thing to get into, but it might just be time to replace the stupid coin battery inside of that thing. The other one is the remote itself gets updates. There's firmware updates for the little included remote itself, and you might just need to double check that, because sometimes that's what causes the voice commands to not work anymore. So those two things are certainly worth checking, because replacing a battery and doing a firmware update on the remote are easier than uninstalling and reinstalling Plex from scratch. That's what I got.
That's dumb.
Yeah.
All right, John. A while back, we cautioned that the Roku Ultra cannot be powered by a typical USB port, and that its manual clearly states that you need to use the included power adapter with a wall outlet. But what about the Roku Express 4K Plus? Oh my God, I hate my world. I hate my life. I hate it.
It's 2021. It's the new updated model. They had to add a plus on the end of it to let you know.
4K Plus.
Yeah.
Can he plug that into his Outlaw Audio 976 Pre-Pro's USB port for power? That would help cut down on some clutter. This is one of those questions that lets me know that you either are waiting for it to arrive or you haven't bought it yet, because the solution the answers to your question will easily be discerned by you when you try it and it doesn't power on. So I don't know.
It should work. It should work. I'm just going by the specs. I haven't used the new 2021 Roku Express 4K Plus. But it does state right there that it uses a maximum 5 volts, 1 amp, a maximum 2.5 watts, and the manual for the Roku Express 4K Plus mentions that you can plug it into the USB port of most televisions, and that if that doesn't work, just use the included USB power wall wart adapter. But looking at the specs for the Outlaw, it does have 2 USB ports on the back of that Outlaw Pre-Pro that are labeled accessory power, and they're rated for 5 volts, 1 amp, 2.5 watts. They're rated for that, so it should work. If it doesn't, there is the included wall wart, but it should work. And just for reference, the Roku Ultra is 12 volts, 1.5 amps, which is more than basically any USB port. There are, some of the USB-C ports that can supply that kind of power now, but that is definitely more, and they are very explicit in the manual. Don't plug this into the USB port of your television. It's not going to work. So it's different for the Ultra. The Express 4K Plus should work.
Okay. We mentioned how some XLR to RCA adapters are meant for microphones, so it's important to get the correct XLR adapters for preamp outputs. Does that apply to regular XLR cables too? Could a change of XLR cables impart a coloration to the sound? So the answer is no. The reason is because the wires inside don't care how you wired it, as long as the one connects to the right one. The reason why that you worry about the RCA is because of the adapter, the fact that we're going from an RCA to an XLR.
That's right.
Right. So inside the XLR, if you looked at them or whatever, the one that connects to the right pin on one is going to connect to the right pin on the other one, or vice versa, however that works. So it doesn't matter if you haven't wired them with the correct color or whatever wire on the inside. No one cares. The electricity, as long as you haven't switched which pin is being connected to which pin, which is what can happen if you have an RCA, and because the RCA, I know it's a big long plug, but there's different sections of it, and the different sections get the different. Different
standard RCA, there's just the pin and the sleeve.
Right.
But that's 2 connections, whereas an XLR has 3. It has 3 pins in an XLR. So it's the converting of 3 to 2. What do you do with the 3rd pin, right? In the case of a preamp, you actually want to leave it dangling, and it has to be the correct one that's left dangling. In the case of a microphone, there's 2 of them that should get wired together. So that's why the adapter, you have to get either a microphone or a preamp XLR to RCA adapter. But when it's literally just an XLR to XLR connection, there's no difference there. Those are all the same, and there is absolutely no imparting of coloration of the sound to different XLR cables. That is straight no.
Yes. No coloration. John is still looking for a room correction auto EQ upgrade over the parametric EQ that's built into his Outlaw Audio Pre-Pro. Many DSP's add-on direct products are too expensive for his budget, but if he were to replace the Pre-Pro entirely and get an Atmos and DTS-X upgrade in the process, he might be able to justify that. So what about the ToneWinner AT300 Pre-Pro? Man, dude, how about just a receiver with 3 outs? Can we just do that?
I'm going to be getting to that. Yeah.
Summit Hi-Fi sells them. It's marketed as a 16-channel Pre-Pro, and they mention having their own auto room correction as well as parametric EQ for each channel, all for the low price of $1,350. So how's that for a solution? Is it terrible? Can I just say terrible? I mean, I think we talked about this thing a while back.
We did talk about the ToneWinner a while back. Yes, we did.
Don't remember a ton of it, but you know.
I mean, it's Jade Designs, the same parent company as Emotiva. That's who's behind the design of the AT300.
Keep waiting for those updates. They're coming.
Firmware
update on the way.
The 16-channel marketing is pretty misleading because it can actually do 13 speaker channels, and it can do 13. It goes beyond 11. So you can have your 7.1.4, that's your 11, and then you could add either front wides and take you to 9.1.4, or you could have 6 overhead speakers. You could do 7.1.6. That's the same as the flagship Denon and Marantzas, but at a lower price, although, of course, you have to connect this thing to external amplification. But what it has are 16 connections on the back, not 16 XLR connections. It's got 14 XLR connections. It has 2 additional RCA subwoofer outputs. Those are all doing the same thing. So it's like it is 7.1.6 or 9.1.4, but it has 3 places to plug in subwoofers, so they like round that up to 7.3.6 or 9.3.4 and call it 16 channels. It isn't. It isn't 16 channels. It's 14 channels. That's the the point one being one of those. So that's what that is, to hopefully clarify that a little bit, clear as mud. It does have parametric EQs. It does not have the same number of bands of parametric EQ on every channel. It gives you 11 bands for the front 3 channels. It gives you 7 bands for all the other channels. It only gives you 5 for the subwoofer, which is the one that needs it the most. But that's the one that gets the fewest bands, but that's what you get. So it's different number of bands per channel. The auto EQ, and it's weird. It comes with an actually pretty decent microphone, but it takes one measurement position. It sets your levels and distances, and then auto applies the parametric EQ from one position. It's like the original version of YPOW from Yamaha with a little bit better microphone. That's what it's doing. Now,
so welcome to like 2004.
Yeah. Now you can go in there and you can manually change the parametric EQ. You could either do it without having measured, or you can do it after you've measured. You can go in there and manually change the parametric EQ to your liking. But the question is, how is that any different than what you already have with your Outlaw?
I was going to say.
It's no different than what you already have with your, other than
no fur filters. It's just parametric EQ. We've gotten away from parametric EQ for the last, basically
even
since
Yamaha
Odyssey
has now. With RSC, they've got fur filters over at Yamaha, the reflected sound control. The difference is that the ToneWinner can do it automatically. The Outlaw that he has doesn't do it automatically, but in either case, I would end up wanting to do it manually, because taking a single measurement position, that's not a good way to auto EQ your room.
Especially when Room EQ Wizard can do a lot of it for you these days.
Exactly. So if you were going to, my recommendation when what you have to work with is a parametric EQ, and that can do a good job. I don't want to put it in anybody's head that a parametric EQ can't do a good job. It can do a very good job. But to do it properly, I would want to measure manually. I would want to measure in more than one position. And then I would use Room EQ Wizard to calculate what parametric parameters I should enter. And you could do that with your Outlaw. Now, what your Outlaw can't do is give you Atmos and DTS-X. It tops out at 7.1. So those are the differences there. But it sounds like what you want is to be able to justify spending a little over $1,000 to get something that does have automated room EQ, and I don't blame you for that because the manual process takes some time.
I'm 100% on board with being lazy about EQ. I mean, I just don't have the time or the energy to do it.
He wants to keep his external amplifiers, and I'm fine for that. $1,400. You were going to spend $1,350 potentially on this AT300. $1,400 can get you the Onkyo TX-RZ50 that has Dirac built in. That has Dirac that you don't even need to use a laptop with. It's designed to run with the microphone connected to the AV receiver, and then you can use an app. You can use the Dirac app to just run the program, but that is automated. That is more sophisticated than parametric EQ, and the TX-RZ50 has a full set of pre-outs. So it doesn't go up to 13.1, but I mean, your Outlaw certainly didn't. The TX-RZ50 is 11.1, 7.1.4.
You don't need more than 11 channels. Shut up.
You really don't. So, I mean, to me, I've mentioned it before. He seems reticent to go with an AV receiver. I think he's just stuck in separates land. It has to be separates, or it has to be XLR connections, because, of course, the Onkyo uses RCA connections. But please let me assuage you of those fears for what you want to do. And I'm on board with this. I'm on board to upgrading to Atmos and DTSX. I'm on board to upgrading to Dirac. I'm absolutely on board with that. And the price is right there. So Onkyo TX-RZ50.
You know, if we could just take a little side note here. It's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it has to do with something being new. You know, more uniqueness. So Dirac is like the new hotness, right? Dirac's like, ooh, this is new. Now, Dirac's not really doing anything that's so revolutionary. Like Odyssey hit the stage, and Odyssey was like completely different than anything we had seen before, and absolutely changed the game. Now everybody's kind of doing. Now Odyssey is like the old man around on the block, right? And Odyssey is like, oh well, that's just Odyssey. Dirac is the new one. Like, you know, there's this sort of desire that we have to be not only get the latest technology and have the coolest stuff, but it also has to be stuff that people don't immediately recognize the name of. You know, it's one thing to get a sports car, it's another thing to get an Italian sports car. Why is it better that it's Italian? Well, it costs more, and it's got this funny name and everything else, right?
Harder to fix.
Sure, it's a lot more expensive. It's, you know, it gets worse gas mileage. It sounds better, but you know, so you bought a Mustang. Everybody's like, oh, you just bought a Mustang. Well, you know, and then somebody else bought a Lamborghini. Oh, well, they bought a Lamborghini. That's so much nicer. You know, or, you know, when the McLarens hit and everything else, suddenly, oh my God, you got to have one of those.
Well, I love how the guys in the UK, they get excited about importing a Mustang because that's an American car, and they're importing it. You should
see how excited people would get in Australia about a Harley.
Yeah, there you go.
Holy moly, they would lose their minds because it would cost as much to import the Harley as the Harley.
Right.
People would come, people from Australia, I'm not lying, I knew guys, they would come here, they would buy Harleys, they would put them into a shipping container and then ship them back in the shipping container. I don't know what they told them was in the shipping container, but it was full of Harleys is what it was full of. And they would just sell them like blue jeans over, you know, Levi's over in Russia or whatever. People used to tell me they would do stuff like that. So, you know, not only are you wanting to have a really good room correction experience, not only are you wanting to upgrade and get the latest sound formats and video formats and everything else, but you also want to have the feeling that you're unique and somehow you know, more knowledgeable than those. And believe me, I'm not judging you. I'm not saying you're a bad person for this. I'm saying that this is how we as human beings sometimes react, especially, you know, I'm a member of a lot of hobbies, climbing, cycling, AV, you know, home theater. I mean, I have a lot of different interests, and I see this happening over and over again. Don't be afraid to do the thing that is literally the best thing that you can do, but isn't so much as cool as having, you know, the not quite as best thing. You know, there's a lot of people in cycling right now that are just in love with electronic shifting. These same people are like, the battery died on my shifter and now I can't shift. Okay, so maybe it's not the best thing, but it is the newest thing.
In the home theater realm, Lots of us have heard of Onkyo. In the general population, the number of people who know what Onkyo is, you're still going to sound like a unicorn.
Don't have to tell people it's a receiver.
Definitely not.
You could just say, I have separates. This is my processor, and this is my amplifier. Those are separate things. It's still separates because you're not using the amplifier section on your receiver at all. So therefore, it's still separate. So you can still tell people that, and they'll like, oh, I think I've heard of Onkyo. It's fine. Put tape over it. It bothers you that much. Anyways, so I just want to empower you to just get the good thing, even though it doesn't have a name brand that nobody knows about except for you. And plus, ToneWinner, that's just a dumb name. Let's just all be honest. Okay? That's just dumb. Jonathan with the CDEN 4.0. Whatever. 4.0. Construction is winding down, and Jonathan's very excited to have his theater back very soon. The renovation after the flood caused by Hurricane Ida has allowed him to make the room even bigger, and now the theater is longer than it is wide, which means it can have 2 rows of seats. Excuse me, I'm about to burp.
Too much Coca-Cola.
Too much Coke. With the second row on a riser, and there's still about 7 feet of room behind the second row. So he's got a small bar counter at the back, and then his patio doors on the back wall. And it's all gray. Everything's gray.
He has gone for neutral gray. I'm in favor of that. I like a neutral.
It looks very nice.
It
looks nice. I like he's got his little platform there with some steps up and down. Oops, I pressed the wrong button and things are going weird. Okay. He went with his plan and ours and stuck with a 5.2.4 configuration. He decided on in-wall surround speakers, which makes sense, I believe, in here.
Oh, yeah.
In-wall surround speakers positioned in between the 2 rows of seats on the side walls, and the riser and second row are pushed over to the right-hand wall to allow for a proper walkway to the back of the room on the left, and the left being the left as you face the screen.
Yes, yeah.
He also bought the little 2-channel Fosse amp to power his Zone 2 speakers out on his patio. But now he's looking at all the space behind the second row. He's never had that before. With all the walls and ceiling completed, would it be a lot more work? It would be a lot more work, but should he add surround backs? It just feels like maybe he should. Of course, there's the issue of his patio doors taking up virtually all of the back wall. So the surround backs would likely need to go on brackets, basically as close to the rear corners as possible. So what do we think? Just want to stop here for a moment and let everybody try to predict in their heads.
Can you predict what Tom is going to say?
What Tom's going to say?
It's going to be shocking.
I'm gonna really take you all by surprise on this one. What do we think? Would it be worth the effort? He's using his Denon X4400H, so what would he need to do in order to run a 7.2.4 in the theater and still have his Zone 2 patio speakers available? And how high would the surround backs need to be mounted? He wouldn't want them too high, right? You don't worry, they're not going to be too high because they're not going to be there. Yeah. Okay, so I assume rightly, that you will be sitting in la front row seats. That's where you will live, which means that your surround backs, in theory, if you were to have them, which you should not, would have to be high enough to have a clear line of sight to your ear.
Yeah, so theory. Clearing the bar table, clearing the second row of seats, clearing the backs of the front row of seats, so that angle coming down is how high we'd want them to be. Clear line of sight from the back to the front.
Does he have the in-wall speakers already installed?
He does.
I'm not. I see.
I thought the little white rectangles on the side.
Oh, so he only has one. For some reason I read that as 2. Okay, so he's got one surround speaker, and then he's now talking about putting surround backs.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were to do this, the way that I would do it would be to put them as I would buy like the SVS Prime Elevation speakers, put them right where they're supposed to be, and then on. Meaning up in the corners there, and then in the corner of the ceiling and wall, not in the corner of the room, above the door, and then put them in line with your front left and right speakers. They're going to be very high. Angle wise, they're not going to be super different than your overhead speakers as far as, if you look at the angle from your ear to each one of these things, there's not going to be a lot of separation between the two. And I think it's, what's the word I'm going to look at?
Redundant?
useless. It would not. I think not only will it not improve your audio experience, I believe that it may be a detriment to it because of the confusion of the sounds between the overhead sounds and the surround back sounds would be confusing to your ear, and I highly recommend you don't do this.
Yeah, I mean, putting it all together, because I'm the person who's totally willing to recommend having surround backs in a setup. You do have sufficient space even behind the second row for if anyone was sitting at the bar table, it wouldn't be too pleasant for them. But all of those things, normally I'd be the person who's more likely to say that I'm okay with this. But in this scenario, given what's already going on that back wall, given the rest of this setup, given that you're sitting in the front row, and in particular, given that you literally have not heard anything in this new room yet, you're not comparing your 5.2.4 configuration to like anything else and saying, oh, I feel like something's missing behind me. You haven't even heard the setup yet.
Right.
And given that you've completed this room at this point, you're not going to go punching holes in these just finished walls to put surround back speakers in there. Don't put it out of your mind. Do not worry. Stay where you are with your 5.2.4. Enjoy the heck out of it. Enjoy it for, I'm going to say, there's a moratorium on worrying about any more speakers for at least 2.5 years. That is the earliest I will accept a question from you, Jonathan, about adding any more speakers. You must enjoy this new theater for at least that period of time. And then we can talk about maybe spending more money and time on something. And normally I'm the one to be in favor, so that's coming from me.
Obviously, I agree, and I know people forget this, but I do have surround back speakers in my home theater, and they don't not do anything, but they are also physically separated from the rest of my speakers fairly well. I will almost certainly, and I've been sitting here thinking about it, as we've been doing this podcast, about me moving speakers around so that I can get top fronts, top rears sort of thing instead of, with my prime elevation speakers. Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about moving everything around to make that happen rather than having what I currently have. So and I would get rid of my surround backs the minute I did that. So I'm telling you, I don't think it's a good idea, but you do you.
Luke, we should just touch on the question. If he had done that and still wanted to use Zone 2,
you would need another 2-channel app.
Just buy another 2-channel app, because you're gonna use the Zone 2 pre-outs anyway.
Right.
So now it would just be 2 out of your 11 speakers, if you had gone for 7.2.4, 2 out of those 11 speakers would need to be powered externally, and then you would need another external 2-channel amp for the pre-outs of your Zone 2, and you can still do all of that, except that's an old enough receiver. You wouldn't be able to continue playing immersive audio, Atmos or DTS-X, in the theater while simultaneously playing the same source in just stereo on Zone 2. If you wanted to duplicate the sources, it would all be stereo. You could do the all-channel stereo thing, but there is that limitation on your X4400H. It's not until the newest models that Denon has finally allowed you to have a 2-channel down mix, so you can continue playing Atmos or DTS-X, or it's just 7.1 audio in the theater and simultaneously play the same source in 2-channel out on the patio. You can't do that with yours, but you can still power all of the speakers, 13 speakers at that point. 4 of them will be powered externally.
Luke is trying to figure out the right TV choice for a friend. She sits 7 or 8 feet away and wants a nice movie-like experience. They've tried out what a 65-inch would look like, and she'd rather have a 75-inch. Marry this woman. Mary, snatch her up before somebody else gets her. She is already taken. At the very least, she's dipped her toe into the AV pool, and she's going to get sucked down like Alice in Wonderland. You must marry this woman. Let me see. She'd rather have a 75-inch because she really doesn't want to move the furniture to sit any closer. She has a large collection of DVDs, so upscaling needs to be good, and a couple of seats are maybe 45 degrees off axis, so that's somewhat important too. Naturally, Luke would love to recommend a 77-inch OLED, but the budget is $2,000. So he was thinking maybe getting the Vizio P Quantum X, but what do we suggest? Yes,
75 inch.
75 inches.
Which for $2,000 is doable.
is doable, right? So OLEDs are going to be...
OLEDs are 3,000.
Yeah, OLEDs are out because of the price, but as far as the off-axis viewing and stuff like that, OLEDs are going to be your best bet.
Of course.
LCDs, and I know that that's on LCD, it's LED. Shut up. It's an LCD. They're all LCDs. They have gotten a lot better with off-axis viewing angle, but you still want to be a little bit careful with that. So, I don't know about the P Quantum X. I mean, that would...
I mean, there's two things he mentioned that the Vizio P Quantum X is not strong at, and that is off-axis viewing. You really want to be bang on axis with that one. And the other is upscaling. It is not good at upscaling standard definition. Now, you might be using a disc player that does the upscaling for you, so that might be a bit of a moot point. But those two things in particular, the Vizio P Quantum X is not great at doing on its own. The TCLs that are in this price range, the Hisenses that are in their price range, similar things. So there is a very specific model that I'm going to mention to you that checks all the boxes here, because I am not a fan of what Samsung has done in 2021 with their 4K television lineup. I think there is essentially the one and only flagship 4K model that is worth considering in Samsung's lineup in 2021, the QN90A. That is their Neo QLED 90A. That's the flagship 4K. That's the only one I think is worth anything. All the models below that I think are bad. I don't think they're good. They've gotten worse every year in the 4K lineup because they're trying to push everybody to 8K. All the good displays in Samsung's lineup are in their 8K lineup now, and only the flagship 4K is worth anything anymore. So I'm going to point you to a 2020 model, and specifically the Q80T, which you can still get on Amazon, at least at the moment I was recording this, and I did email Luke about this earlier because I'm like, I don't miss out on this.
It's still there.
$1,800 Samsung Q80T. So this is not the Q80A from this year. It is not a QN85A from this year. It's the Q80T from 2020. Checks all the boxes. Very good upscaling. It does have the wide angle filter, but still with a VA panel behind it. So you still get good contrast and black levels as far as LCD goes, but it does have the wide angle viewing filter on it. So it's better than just a straight VA panel, which is what the Vizio and the TCLs use. So yeah, that one checks all the boxes, and including the price and the size that you wanted. So that's the one.
Okay. Very specific. They don't do Dolby Vision, though, right?
They absolutely do not do Dolby Vision. No, Samsung does not do Dolby Vision.
That's the one thing you'll be given up by getting one of
those. You got good HDR.
Brad, back in 2010, Brad had an addition and renovation done on his house. His single-car garage was converted into more living space, and a new two-car garage was constructed. The original single-car garage space ended up with a finished dimensions of 10.5 by 30 by 9. The end still has the original garage door. It's never, ever used anymore, but for house value reasons, it makes sense to still have it. 10 feet in from the garage door, a simple wall was constructed, so there's a small room there, 10.5 by 10, with a door.
Yeah,
so,
the garage door and a regular door in the wall that was constructed.
Very strange. So the room itself is really 20 by 9?
Well, no, the room itself is 10.5 feet wide by 30 feet long. Then they put up a wall 10 feet into that. So now you've got a...
So it's 20 feet by 20.
Well, yeah, you've got a section that's 20 feet by 10.5 feet wide and a section that's 10 feet by 10.5 feet wide.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. I was envisioning that and not looking at this picture. That breaks my brain because it looks like it was drawn by Dolly. Okay. Just on the other side of that wall is the landing to enter the house. Okay. So I'm looking at... This is... I don't know what I'm looking at.
There's a step up to the door that goes into the house.
The wall between the house and this covered garage is a full double wall and 2 doors, and the ceiling is also double drywall and fully insulated from the space above. The far end has 3 doors. One leads into the new 2-car garage, and the other 2 doors on the sides lead outside. Okay. The original plan was use the small 10-foot space for storage and that 20-foot space for a home theater and computer room. The contractor built in some acoustic treatments on the side walls as well as... What?
Yep.
Sorry. That's crazy.
This is what we got.
Before. The contractor built in some acoustic treatments on the side walls as well as a large treatment on the ceiling at the end with the 3 doors. Wires were pre-run, but all this was done back when a much smaller screen was in mind. The doors made it very awkward, and even a 65-inch TV was being bumped into. So the room has fallen out of use and never became a home theater. Brett has always had the idea in mind, but he fell into analysis paralysis. He wound up putting an inexpensive 75-inch TCL in his living room with a small soundbar, and that isn't really what he wants. And the closest seat is 10 feet away. He isn't getting the theater-like experience he wants. This room is green. This is a green room.
Yep.
I feel like I'm under the sea. All right, you should put fish on the wall and just call it the fish tank. He has now corresponded via email with Rob and DJ. He originally had some big ideas in mind about moving that wall at the 10-foot mark, turning the landing at the entrance into the house into a seating riser for a second row, installing an ultra short throw projector with a motorized screen, and expanding to a full 7.2.4 configuration. But all those big ideas led him into the same analysis paralysis. What he's got on hand are a set of Yamaha speakers that he really likes, a pair of SVS PB 1000 Pro subs that aren't even being used right now. He knows he wants to use his 2-seater recliners and a small console between them. It's just really just 2 people watching the vast majority of the time, and the dog. There's
yeah,
a dog.
Yeah, for sure.
He has a form of sensory autism, and a pitch black room would be problematic for him. That's what led him to consider an ultra short projector setup, thinking he could use that with the lights on and still get a 110-inch image. But after emailing with DJ and Rob, he realized he could set up that 10-foot space quite easily and quickly. He put some tape on the garage door to approximate an 83-inch OLED, and if he sticks with 5.2.2 for the time being, he doesn't even need to buy anything other than the ceiling speakers. So, what's my opinion? What is my opinion? I am so confused by everything I just read. So
I'm going to have to bring that diagram down here so you can read it.
I have no idea what I'm even talking about. I don't know. If you guys heard me say all that and were like, got it, you are a better person than me.
Let me put
all
this
I know is there's
down
doors everywhere. There's a landing, which may or may not have anything to do with anything. I have no idea what's going on. All right. And sir, I am not making fun of you. I just want to say I'm not making fun of you.
I tried to make it as
very
comprehensible as I could. This was multiple emails back and forth.
No,
and
I understand. I understand. So basically, the 10-foot by 10.5-foot space.
Right. Yes, that's right.
With the garage door.
The garage door in it.
He wants to make that into his home theater now.
Correct.
Because and he's got tower Yamaha speakers and a couple of PB 1000 subs, Pro subs.
Because the other end, the other 10.5-foot wall, has 3 doors. There's 3 doors there. So I don't know where you put a large flat panel without a door banging into it. And if you bring it all the way in front of the section where the doors are, well, now you've got this big space behind the TV and speakers. So that's the entrance to his new 2-car garage. So you've got to be able to get to that door down at the end. You can't ignore those doors. That's how you get to the new 2-car garage. So do you want to walk past a big flat, or in his original plans, a motorized screen? Do you want to walk past all of that just to get to the entrance? Or do you want to just use this 10-foot enclosed space that you already have? And maybe just go with an OLED instead of a projection setup. That's basically where we are.
So the issues, so basically, he wants to put the TV on near the wall that is actually a garage door.
Correct.
So this is a roll-down garage door. It's not going away. It's got the tracks up there.
Yeah.
There's some acoustic panels on the wall that looks like raw insulation. I mean, I'm a little confused as to what I'm seeing there, too. So if he's going with what is that, 75-inch? Or
either the 77 or the 83. Yeah. Actually, if we look at the image where you put the tape up, the inside perimeter of the tape is 77 inches. The outside perimeter is 83. And it wouldn't necessarily be at that height. He just put the tape up there because there's windows in his garage door, and he didn't want to put the tape over the windows just to approximate the size. But that's what we're looking at. Okay. So 77 on the inside perimeter, 83 on the outside perimeter, rather than a projection setup. And he wants to be able to keep the lights on. That's a thing. So
okay, so I've got a lot of opinions about
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Let's just start with that. But let me just say I've got opinions about that. I'll get to it. So let me read the question.
Okay.
What's my opinion? What's Tom's opinion? Can the 10.5 by 10 by 9 foot space work for a 2-person theater? Does a large flat panel make more sense? He wants the theater-like experience, but prefers to sit about 2/3 into a movie theater, and keep in mind that he wants some lights on. Any reason to knock down that wall and try to use the whole 30-foot space? There's no world in which I'm going to say knock down that wall.
Okay.
Okay. There is just, you do not need 30 feet of space in a 10-foot wide. I mean, it's a hallway at that
Right.
point.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So is 10 by 10 small? Yes.
Yeah.
Will you get the idea of being in a large theater? Will you get the same experience as being in a large theater in a 10 by 10 foot bedroom, basically?
Yeah.
If you think about a kid's bedroom, that's 10 by 11 is very common. He's in a
Sure.
10 by
10 and a
10 and a
half.
half.
Yeah.
Can you get that same experience? I don't know that psychologically you will ever experience that because of you're just in such a small space. But can you have sound that's great? And the answer is, of course, yes. And can you have a picture that is the right size? The answer, of course, is yes. So I like we just talked about as far as seating and stuff like that. If you get a 77 or 65 or 77 inch TV, or 77 or whatever it is.
Yeah, 77, sit 6.5 feet away. 83, sit about 8 feet away.
Right.
It's pretty darn close.
Basically, you can take that chair and then put it in, you get the TV or whatever, put it in the room. Because remember, you're not going to mount it to the garage door.
Not directly to the garage door, no.
That's not going to happen. That's not, so it's going to be in the room some amount of space. So you have to factor that in as well. And you won't really know. I mean, you can do the math and everything, but I think that just sitting in the room and turning on the TV and watching something for a few minutes is all the experimentation you and your wife will need.
I mean, if you were willing to, you could even temporarily move your 75 inch that you already own in there just to see if the experience is nice. Now, looking at the photo, this is like a fisheye lens, so it's not giving a true representation.
Right.
So
it's really
that's
confusing.
warping that a little bit. But I mean, if you were willing to take that step, because I mean, obviously purchasing a 77 or an 83 inch OLED and then having to return it or whatever if it's not the exact size you want, you've got a 75 inch on hand. He was saying in the living room, it's not giving him the theater experience, but by and large, he's sitting substantially farther away than he will be in the 10 by 10 room. So yeah, that's an experiment you can do because it's going to be the same thing, a TV on a stand in front of the garage door.
The things that I'm concerned about in this room more than anything is that stupid garage door.
Okay.
You've got two just way overpowered subwoofers for the space.
Oh, sure.
I mean, you're gonna crush this itty bitty room with these two PB1000 Pro subs. Hopefully you'll be able to place them exactly where you should. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't. But it is going to be problematic because you're going to pressurize it, and that door is going to do crazy vibration things. If you think about, just standing in...
I don't know.
Dude, I mean, I don't know how wind works where you are, but here
right.
in Florida, when the wind howls, my garage door, which looks a lot like this, except that mine's hurricane resistant, so it has all these big I-beam looking things going across it. It's not exactly silent. Okay. So I am pretty sure that when he pressurizes the space, that door is going to rattle in some way. That is my biggest concern for you. Is that how do you fix that? I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know. Is this door ever going to open again?
Never again. He is never going to open it again.
And that's fine, but is there some way of actually just installing it permanently?
Right,
and getting rid of all the things that might rattle? I mean, there's a lot of things that can rattle, and those little anything that shakes the doors, it's going to be the little wheels that are in the track that's going to be the problem. So that's the biggest concern I have. That being said, if you want to be in a room that has some lights in it at the same time, bias lighting is 100% what I would do here.
Okay.
I would put bias lighting behind your screen so that it shines on. And this is one of those times where Rob's like, "Oh, get a nice white wall," and you've got a white.
For this. I mean, if you have flat panel as your display, there's no problem. It's not going to be any issue. It's not a projector anymore.
So having that white door back there is no problem. Just put bias lighting behind there, and I bought some. I haven't even. I bought it for Christmas a couple of years ago, and I haven't put it up yet. But it's still on my list of things to do. But you can actually get some that you can change the intensity and stuff like that, and really, they are 6500K, or I think is what we recommend, and then you can change how bright it gets, so you can get the perfect brightness for you, and then put it on some sort of remote control if you want to do that, remote control, so that when you turn on your TV, it goes on. That's the way I would handle the lighting thing. That way that you get the lights that you want. It's at the front of the room where you're looking for that sensory input anyways. And that's 100% the way I would go with that lighting thing. As far as the room working, I think what you're going to end up, what I would do is I would see how, I don't know if the door opens into the room or not.
It does. Yeah. The door at the back opens into the 10-foot room.
That's how close you can have your couch.
That's the back of your couch. The back of your couch is the door, because the door is in the middle of the back wall.
Right. So, you put your couch or your whatever seat you pick, that you're going to test out. But remember, your couch is going to be, thicker. So if you just put like a folding chair in there and sit down and put it right against where that door is, you're actually probably 6 inches, 8 inches
closer,
further back.
Or you're further back in the folding chair. Yeah.
Yeah, than you would be in the recliner. So, make sure you take that into account. But yeah, I think there's no reason why you can't do this. In fact, your subwoofers are overkill for this. Your tower speakers are overkill for this. Everything is over. No one makes, not nobody, but there's very few speakers that are out there that are like 10 foot by 10.5 foot. I don't know if I can fill that space. Everything works in this room.
That's problematic. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like just taking the 75-inch TCL. I like getting because you got a whole bunch of crap in here. Get everything out.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Set up your whatever you're going to use for a TV stand or something that you can use in lieu of that. Put your TCL in there where you think that your actual TV will go. Put a couple of chairs in there for you and your wife where you think that you'll actually be sitting, or just wherever, and then move the chairs around until you and your wife go, that looks like it's about the right size.
Yeah.
And then either buy a 75-inch or 77-inch, or I doubt you're going to need the 83. I'm going to be honest with you.
Okay.
You might.
And
but
I would doubt it would be smaller than the 77 to a 65.
No.
I doubt it's probably going to be the 77, maybe the 83.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
Okay.
All right, so how to go about acoustically treating this small space, like floor to ceiling. Everything, just turn it into a big absorption thing. The contractor already built in panels on the side walls that actually look like they're about right for first reflection points. Then there are cabinets on the left and right sides of the back of the room, and he'd be fine removing cabinet doors from those. He was thinking he'd like to put up a stick frame wall in the front of the garage door. Again, it's never used. He could fill that stick frame with insulation and cover it with a nice fabric or curtain. He could even mount the flat panel to the stick frame, or just use the stand in front of it. And since the ceiling is at 9 feet, he'd be fine making an acoustic soffit to go all around the perimeter of the ceiling. He was thinking that he could also hide wires for some on-ceiling speakers, since he doesn't really want to cut into the double drywall. So anything else, does all that sound good? I think that sounds great. I like the soffit. I like the wall up front. That will, if you build a wall and you not fill it, but you take it and have it, with insulation, floor to ceiling, wall to wall up front, then that's not going to stop the rattling, but it might reduce how much you hear. But just remember, the tracks are going back into the room behind you. So if it's rattling in those tracks, it's just it might as well be rattling in the room. So there's still that to consider.
But acoustic treatment wise, I'm all for that plan, because that's basically a nice bass trap at the front of your room. It gets rid of the speaker boundary effect that you might have, because your speakers are going to be close to the front walls just because of the size of the room. It does look like your first reflection points are already taken care of on the side walls, and then you've got these cabinets on the left and the right of the back of the room there, and certainly if you're willing to remove some doors on those cabinets and have some insulation in there, I don't really think you need to go beyond that. You don't need to go absolutely insane and straight.
I guess the only other thing I would
ceiling,
the only other thing I would think was behind you,
right? And the door is right in the middle, right behind him. So,
and that's kind of problematic. But you can hang one from that door. You can hang one from that door. if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, just make sure you keep it from vibrating. But other than that, yeah, I mean,
his seats are on either side of center, so he can have a panel
Sure.
on either side of the door, and that's pretty close.
It's probably close enough, right? So that, but your plan plus a couple of panels behind you,
Okay.
I think is good.
Yeah.
I think it's good. I don't really see any reason to remove the doors on the cabinets either, to be honest with you.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you could. I just don't know why. I mean, unless you were planning on filling it with insulation, but I really don't see. I mean, you could, and then say it's just fusion because sorry if you heard my mic couldn't hit. That was me talking with my hands. So, what should you get for on-ceiling speakers? He might expand to 4 overheads later on, but he'll start with just 2 since they're all his current AV receiver can handle. He doesn't want to cut into the double drywall up front, up top.
Yeah, so not in ceiling installed speakers. Doesn't want that. And I'm with you there. And you've got a 9-foot ceiling, so there's no reason you can't install speakers on the ceiling. You absolutely can.
So, of course, the SVS Prime elevations and the ELACs are the 2 that I always go with. Other than those, I don't. I mean, there are other ones. There's the Klipsch models, but you've got Yamahas. And I
wouldn't match those in this case. The other one is AVRant Audios. They've got their Novus wedge-shaped ones, but those are actually the most expensive ones. So unless you go with a gloss finish on the Prime elevations. The gloss finish on the Prime elevations from SES is $600, but the standard black wood finish is $500.
Do not pay for the gloss finish, please.
Yeah, the AVRant Novus wedge-shaped ones are $550, so right in between those 2 price points. ELAC's Debut 2.0 A4.2 Atmos speakers, wedge-shaped ones that can be mounted on the wall or ceiling, $330 for a pair of those. So they're the least expensive, and yeah, I'd probably just pony up and get the SVS Prime elevations, to be honest. They're going to match with just about any speakers you might ever upgrade to, and their ceiling mounting system is very straightforward. I mean, it means you'll put drywall anchors into your ceiling, but that is a far cry from cutting an 8-inch hole.
Yeah. It makes most sense to stick with 5, not 7 floor level speakers, right?
Yeah. You got no room behind you for surround backs.
Yeah. The surrounds could actually sit on the cabinet shelves, or if he just removes a couple of cabinet doors. Should he put some insulation behind them and call that good enough? I would I wouldn't put them inside the cabinets if you can get them proud of the cabinets.
Oh, sure. But actually use like a cabinet shelf as the place to hold a surround speaker. That makes sense to me, for sure.
It's just like putting them on a shelf.
Yeah, and yes, some insulation behind there because it is a cubby.
And which of the should the final screen size be? He was going to pay for an ultra short throw projector and motorized ambient light rejecting. Oh, because he wants a light in the room.
If he was going to,
which I just still don't think you need. If he ambient light rejecting screen, and then he can afford his 83-inch OLED. But the 77-inch costs $2,000 less, and then there are 85-inch LCDs that cost a lot less too. But looking at his 75-inch TCL in his living room, he doesn't want to skimp and go too small. It's more relaxing to him if he can just sit a bit farther away. So putting it all together, what should he get? Well, I already told you what to do about this.
Yeah, if you can. So, I'm really in favor of the idea of temporarily taking your TCL into that room. And that'll tell you, because you'll be able to tell very quickly. And I mean, where your seat goes is determined in this room. It's when you open the door, that's where the back of your couch goes. In fact, if you're willing to take the couch in there too, that's going to be the seat that you're going to use, the 2-seater couch with the little drink console in the middle of it. So take all that in there. You know exactly where the back of that seat is going to go because it's basically as close to the door when the door is swinging open as you can. Bring your 75-inch in there. That'll tell you. You
might have to consider too the reclining function of those things as well, because if one reclines and then you can't get in the room, that's a problem. So, you might have to do that as well. I gotta go.
You've got to go, and that's perfectly fine. So I will transition over to just Rob on the View, and we will say bon voyage, Tom, and
have fun.
Yeah. Awesome. We got through exactly what I wanted to. Hooray, it worked out.
I figured once it said it was for me.
That's right.
All right, I gotta go. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. And here I go, continuing on. We will go to Martin and John T. I put their questions together because they are asking similarly related things. So, Martin recently moved, and he left his overhead speakers behind at his old place. So, in the new house, he's back to a 5.1 configuration. And he's not really sure he's even going to bother going back to Atmos, if he's being honest. So, he noticed he can still set his Apple TV 4K's audio output to the auto /Atmos available setting. That's what it actually says in the setup menu on his Apple TV 4K. So he noticed that when he does that and he plays Atmos content from, say, Netflix, the front panel of his Denon receiver still says Atmos on it. That's the listening mode that it goes into. But since he's gone down to a 5.1 speaker configuration, what is he actually hearing? And is there any advantage to that front panel still saying Atmos when he's just using 5.1? So this is a little bit interesting because I wonder, did you basically leave the settings of your Denon as they were in your previous place when you had a full Atmos setup with 7 speakers around, or at least an Atmos setup was 5.1.2 at a minimum? Did you leave that and then just only physically connect 5 speakers without having like redone Odyssey and redone your amp assign? Because there's basically only 2 ways that this could happen. Either that was the case, you didn't change the settings in your Denon, but you just physically connected 5 speakers, and your Denon, as far as it's concerned, still has 2 overhead speakers or a pair of surround backs or both, or I'm not sure what model Denon that he has. So either it's under the impression that it still has those speakers, they're not physically connected, so clearly there's no sound coming out, but that's what the Denon receiver believes is your speaker configuration, and therefore it's playing Atmos. Because if you set the amp assign in your Denon to 5.1, and you rerun Odyssey so that it detects the speakers and knows you only have 5 speakers, then the front panel will not say Atmos. It won't say Atmos in that scenario when the amp assign is down to 5.1, because that is not compatible with an Atmos signal in a Denon or Marantz receiver. The only other instance is if you have a new enough model that it has Dolby speaker virtualization, height speaker virtualization, because then even in a 5.1 setup, it can virtualize overhead speakers. So if you have a new enough Denon that it has height speaker virtualization and that is turned on in the audio section settings, then it is virtualizing the overhead sounds and still playing back the Atmos soundtrack. So it's one of those 2 scenarios, Martin. If what you have is a little bit older AV receiver that didn't have the Dolby height speaker virtualization, and you just didn't change the settings, then that's what's going on. It's still under the impression that it's playing other sounds. That should take care of that one. John also had a question about Apple TV 4K and what's going on with Atmos. He wanted to double check. He's got 2 Apple TV 4Ks. One is connected to a Denon X2700H. The other one's connected to a Denon X2400H. Dolby Atmos seems to work perfectly. His Apple TV 4Ks are set to that auto with Atmos enabled setting in the Apple TV 4Ks menu. And Atmos content does result in Atmos being shown on the front of his Denon front displays. But for other audio formats, the front display of his receiver says multi-channel in. And so he just wanted to make sure, because if he uses the apps that are built into his TVs, then the front panel of his Denon typically says Dolby Digital Plus or DD Plus. So is there anything wrong? Is there a setting that he needs to change? So the good news is absolutely nothing wrong. You definitely want to keep the audio output setting of your Apple TV 4K set to auto with Atmos available. That is 100% correct. And all you really need to be aware of is that the Apple TV 4K does all audio decoding internally. That is how it works. It does not ever put out the original bit stream from any of the sources that you're playing. It is set up to decode the audio itself. Now, if it's Dolby Digital 5.1, it decodes that into 5.1 LPCM, linear PCM. Very similar to like a PlayStation. If you notice what its options are, it'll be decoding it into multi-channel PCM. So that's why you're seeing multi-channel in on the front of your AV receiver. If it's Dolby Digital Plus all the way up to 7.1, it's still decoding that internally, turning that into 7.1 linear PCM. And you get multi-channel in on the front of your Denon. Even in the case of Atmos, it actually does the decoding internally. It's actually outputting PCM, but it's what they call the Dolby MAT format. The metadata audio, what is the MAT? I forgot what it is now. Metadata something or other. That's what it stands for. I forgot that off the top of my head. So anyway, it is PCM audio It is uncompressed, non-bitstream audio, PCM audio with the Dolby Atmos extension on it, that Dolby matte format. So that's what's coming out of the Apple TV 4K. That is enough to put your Denon into Dolby Atmos mode, where it says that on the front panel. But at all times, what your Apple TV 4K is outputting is PCM audio. So multi-channel in is exactly what you should see, and nothing is wrong. Okay, next person is Chris T. Chris is pretty sure that he's going to be getting himself one of the new JVC NZ7 laser 4K projectors for his basement home theater. He has noted how JVC's 4K projectors, and Sony's 4K projectors for that matter, actually use the genuine 4K resolution. That is 4096 by 2160, rather than what we're more used to, which is the standard 16:9 aspect ratio, what we should actually be calling Ultra HD. We shouldn't technically be calling it 4K. Ultra HD is the right name for the 16:9 version of it, which is 3840 by 2160, not 4096 by 2160. That's true 4K, and it's more like 1.9 to 1 instead of 1.77 to 1, which is 3840 by 2160 is like 1.77 to 1, and 4096 by 2160 is like 1.9 to 1. So it is a little bit wider. So, natively, the aspect ratio of that JVC is wider than 16:9. What happens when the JVC is showing 16:9 content? You're watching a television program, it's 16:9. What goes on there? He even asks, are there small black bars, vertical black bars on the left and right hand sides of the screen? Yes. That is exactly what happens. The native screen shape that the JVC is projecting is a little bit wider than 16:9. So when you're showing 16:9 content, you have pillar box bars instead of letterbox bars across the top and bottom. When we're showing, CinemaScope content, 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio, you get black bars on the top and bottom. Now, since natively it's 1.9 to 1, and we want to show an image that's 1.77 to 1, a little bit narrower, you get pillar box bars, vertical black bars on the left and right hand side. So he'll be using mostly an Apple TV 4K, NVIDIA Shield Pro, Panasonic Ultra HD Blu-ray player, Xbox Series X, PlayStation 5. Can any of those take advantage of that 4096 resolution? Is there any source that could take advantage of the 4096? I'm going to be perfectly honest. I don't actually know if the Xbox might. The Xbox sometimes supports resolutions that we might not necessarily imagine, because like going back to the Xbox One, it could do the 1440p thing. That's still the case. It can do 1440p resolution coming out of there. Still 16:9, but 1440p instead of either 1080p or 2160p. Going back to like the Xbox 360, it could do those 1366 by 768 resolution displays that were around at the time. I guess obviously some people still have them, but sometimes Xboxes can support resolutions we wouldn't necessarily expect. So I'm not sure. That might somehow have support for 4096 by 2160 instead of only 3840 by 2160. I'm not completely sure, but the other ones do not. The other ones are going to be 16:9 aspect ratios. Are there any sources that could? I guess a PC. You could connect a PC and it would be able to use the native resolution, the 4096 by 2160. This is one of the reasons why, if you've been listening to DJ at all, he's very excited about his Lumigen Radiance video processor that he's added to his projection setup now. That is certainly a device that could scale everything to fit within that. Some people, what they like to do is, for example, you're watching an Ultra HD Blu-ray. Natively on the disc, the Ultra HD Blu-ray uses a 16:9 aspect ratio. If you're watching 2.35 to 1 content off of an Ultra HD Blu-ray, that is 2.35 to 1, but the black bars are there to make it 16:9. But it is not 4096 by 2160. It's 3840 by 2160. And that is the native resolution that's coming out of an Ultra HD Blu-ray player. Some people like to put that into a video processor, like the Lumigen Radiance, and without doing an anamorphic lens or anything like that, they just scale it so that like they're basically just zooming it in. That's what you're doing. You're basically just zooming in the image digitally in the scaler so that now it uses the full 4096 width. And now the black bars, I guess, are a little bit smaller. I mean, there's still going to be black bars if it's, CinemaScope content, but now I guess they're a little bit smaller. I guess if you're watching like a 1.85 to 1 movie, then now it fills the whole screen. If you did it that way, some people like to do that. Certainly the Lumigen Radiance, a scaler of that quality, it's up to the task of doing it. I find it very unnecessary. It is still taking you away from 1-to-1 perfect pixel mapping. My take on this is just imagine that you have 16:9. Yes, technically there are little pillar box vertical black bars being projected at all times by the JVC. You're never making use of all the pixels that it actually has on this slightly wider chip. But I just want to stick to 16:9 because all of these sources are, I want 1-to-1 pixel mapping. That's what I want. I don't want things scaled and stretched and zoomed and smushed and anything like that. When the source has a pixel and the display can just show that 1 pixel, that's what I want it to do without any digital futzing around with it. So that's my personal opinion on it. Certainly a device like a Lumigen Radiance is up to the task of doing some very clean scaling if it just bothers you that you're never using the little, strips on the side. But I would leave it alone. I would stick to 16:9. And right along those lines, he says he's getting himself Seymour AV's Center Stage XD screen fabric, but he intends to build his own frame, so he's not buying a completed screen. Given that the dimensions of the raw fabric are such that it wouldn't actually cost him any extra to build the screen that is, the 1.9-to-1 aspect ratio rather than 16:9. Would there be any benefit to doing that? Again, it's like, are you going to get a Lumigen Radiance so that you can do the little zooming, scaling thing, and then that's really only useful for content that is wider than 16:9 because you don't want to crop off the tops of 16:9 images? Like, it's a lot of messing around and hassle to me. I would just get a 16:9 screen all day long. That's what I would get. Now, those little pillar box black bars on the left and right hand side that the JVC is projecting, they're being projected onto the black border. Whatever screen that you build, have a black border on the left and right, and now that's where those pillar box bars go, and you will never ever see them. It's got some black felt or some black velvet as your side border there, and that's where they go, and you'll never know about it, and hopefully you can put it out of your mind. My advice: stick to 16:9, make a 16:9 screen. Don't worry about the little black bars. Okay, I think this will probably be our final question for this week. Terry Q. Terry has an LG C9 77-inch OLED. He's backed up all his movies using Make MKV, and he uses Plex on an NVIDIA Shield Pro to play them all back. His Ultra HD Blu-ray backups, for the most part, look great. Okay, but in the specific case of the Ultra HD Blu-ray release of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, black and white movie, 1.33-to-1 aspect ratio, the more square shape that movies were back then. That particular movie, for some reason, on his 77-inch C9 OLED, he said looks really bad. These are his words, all kinds of shimmer on the light gray backgrounds. So he's seeing a shimmering effect going on. He made sure that True Motion is turned off, so there's no motion smoothing or soap opera effect going on. And he asks, is it just that black and white movies are problematic on OLEDs, or any other ideas on settings that he might need to change or adjust in order to get this particular movie looking its best? So it's definitely not that OLEDs are just not good for black and white. That is certainly not the case. They can be spectacular for black and white. That perfect contrast that OLEDs have. Wonderful for black and white films. Some people like to adjust the color temperature when they're watching black and white because black and white originally used a warmer color temperature. We're settled on this D65, this 6500 Kelvin white point now for today's movies, but going back it was like 5800, 5900 Kelvin. It was a little bit warmer, a little bit redder. So some people, to get back to that look so that it doesn't look a little bit too cool, a little bit too blue, looks a little bit more reddish, some people like to adjust the color temperature specifically for black and white movies, but it's definitely not that, black and white movies just inherently look noisy or bad or something on an OLED. One thing to be aware of, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, definitely shot on film, of course, at the time, and there is film grain, and I went over to Blu-ray.com and looked up their reviews, because they do great reviews of basically every disc that comes out, it seems. Somehow, somebody over there reviews almost everything. And they're saying, like, this is an excellent transfer onto the Ultra HD Blu-ray. So I wanted to know that. I wanted to know if maybe it's just a bad transfer. That happens sometimes. They're like, no, this is an excellent transfer. But they retained all of the film grain. They didn't scrub it. They didn't apply, digital film grain reduction. They retained the original film grain. So you're going to see some, like, film grain. You're going to see some speckle in that. I mean, what's interesting is... like an example today that was shot on digital would be like 300, Zack Snyder's 300, where, that was shot digitally and then they put in digital film grain, which doesn't really look exactly like film grain, true film grain in that example. But I'm just trying to give you something where if you're not used to looking at film grain, because a lot of people aren't anymore, and a lot of releases that were shot on film, they digitally remove the film grain to make it that perfectly smooth digital looking image that, film purists hate. But then a lot of modern audiences, when they see film grain, they're like, that looks noisy. Like basically any of Zack Snyder's movies, right? Justice League has it. Batman versus Superman has it. Those are all shot digitally, but then he puts digital film grain on it to try and make it, appear a little bit more like original film. So there is true, genuine film grain on Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and they retained it in the Ultra HD Blu-ray release. So some of that speckling is going to be there. That should be there. That was there on the original film. And I'm wondering if that's a little bit of what you're seeing. But I've also had the experience where you have a very good Ultra HD Blu-ray. It's got the actual film grain that should be there from the original film, but because there's some scaling or chroma manipulation going on, you get these weird little digital artifacts that show up on the image that isn't just the film grain. They're like caused by the film grain, but because some processing is being applied to it, or some scaling, or just, messing with the image, and so it can't do the perfect 1-to-1 pixel mapping that I was talking about in the previous question. It's trying to enhance the image somehow or something like that, and you end up with these weird little digital artifacts, and I'm thinking that's more likely the case. So a couple of things you can do on your LG television to make sure that we don't have that. Now, normally for, OLEDs, we tend to recommend having the pixel shifter on there, the screen orbiter. That's under like the screen protection setting, so that it's actually shifting the image around a little bit to try and prevent any image retention or burn-in from happening. But if you want true 1-to-1 pixel mapping, you actually want to turn that pixel orbiter off, the pixel shift off, because, naturally, if you're moving an image around, but the signal had the exact same number of pixels as the screen, if you're going to move it around, then you had to, digitally manipulate it a little bit. So if you turn the pixel shift off, so that you got perfect 1-to-1, you also want to make sure the aspect ratio is set to original with just scan on. Because otherwise you might have some overscan. And again, the only way you can have some overscan is to get away from perfect 1-to-1 pixel mapping. Then make sure that you're in one of... So he's got a C9, so it doesn't have filmmaker mode for a picture mode, but he do have the ISF picture modes. Make sure you're in one of those. Make sure... I'm pretty sure by default all of the noise reduction and, color banding reduction and all of those types of things, I'm pretty sure all those are off by default anyway in the ISF picture modes, but go through the expert and the advanced picture settings and make sure that every form of processing is turned off. But lastly, in just the basic picture settings of the ISF picture mode, make sure that sharpness is turned all the way down to 0. Because even at the default setting of 10, there's a little bit of edge enhancement being applied. And that might be the reason. When you've got film grain and there's a tiny bit of edge enhancement being applied, it basically puts a little white border around each little black fleck of that actual film grain, not digital film grain. It tries to make each little fleck stand out. I'm like, that could be the shimmering. It might just be as simple as the sharpness setting on your TV. That should be all the way down to 0. It shouldn't be at the default of 10. It shouldn't be anything higher, 0. The other thing you could check is in your NVIDIA Shield. You can check the output settings there. It's a little bit tricky because if you want to set your Shield to always output 24, or in fact, they let you get granular. They let you set it to 23.976 frames per second. And if you set it there, there's no option that still supports HDR other than in the NVIDIA Shield, it'll say 3840 by 2160, 23.976 frames per second, YUV 422 at 12 bits, Rec 2020 with Dolby Vision and HDR10 available. That's going to be the only setting you would want to use if you're forcing it to output 23.976 frames per second at all times, which is something I do because, it doesn't do really good automatic frame rate switching. And I'm watching video and almost all of it is in 23.976 frames per second. So that's where I leave mine. But there are occasions when that YUV 422 12-bit signal doesn't always get through it. Like if you're actually going through an AV receiver into your television, sometimes that causes minor issues. So usually, the default setting when you're connected to a display like a C9 OLED, the default setting is going to be 3840 by 2160, 59.94 frames per second, YUV 420 at 10 bits, Rec 2020, with HDR10 available, but not Dolby Vision. That's actually usually the default setting. If you leave it there, coming out of your NVIDIA Shield, Plex has its own automatic frame rate switching, and that actually works. And that's the Plex software. That has nothing to do with the NVIDIA Shield settings. Plex does that on its own. And since you've done Make MKV backups, you probably don't have Dolby Vision on your backups anyway. It's probably HDR10 for your whole Plex library. So for that specific instance, that default setting of 59.94 frames per second, YUV 420, 10-bit, Rec 2020, HDR10 ready coming out of your NVIDIA Shield, and then let Plex do its own automatic frame rate switching. That should get you the cleanest possible signal without any messing of the signal, without any conversions of color spaces or, 10-bit to 12-bit conversion or any of that going on where something might go awry. That's going to be the cleanest signal coming out of your NVIDIA Shield. You also want to make sure under the advanced display settings that the match content color option is off because it doesn't work properly. So that you want to make sure that setting is off. That's as clean as you can get coming out of the Shield. And then I think what I mentioned about the LG OLED settings should get you looking as clean as you can. If all of that is done as I just mentioned, and you're still noticing what looks like flecks of dirt bouncing around on the image and you're not used to it, that is just original film grain, and that is supposed to be there. So I think that takes care of that. So I'm going to stop there. We're going to say that Nick, B, Jorge, and Bertrand have questions that are on the list, and you guys will be first up next week. So I'll scroll back up to the top and remind everybody that our second annual Thanksgiving show with Tom, myself, Lee Overstreet, DJ from Brightside Home Theater, and then Ara and Braden from the HT guys. We're all going to be getting together, the 6 of us, again for a Thanksgiving episode. And one of the things we want to do is answer at least one question. It won't be more than one from our podcast. DJ might collect a question from his listeners, and Ara and Braden might collect a question from their listeners. That's only fair. But we'll be taking one question from the AVRant audience for sure. So send that in to question@avrant.com. Send in your regular questions for this podcast to question@avrant.com for sure. But if you are sending it in for the Thanksgiving episode, just mark it somewhere that it's for the Thanksgiving episode. And like I say, make it something that where you want all 6 of us to weigh in on it. That's the point of being able to ask that. So we're going to have some fun with that. And then, let's thank our listeners of the week. That would be Chris and Alan, who both gave us PayPal donations this week. Really appreciate the financial support. Other financial supporters are via patreon.com/AVRant podcast. We have 132 patrons over there. That's fantastic. Bertrand is one of them. So thank you very much, all of you, for the financial support. Anybody else, if you'd like to sign up, it's an automatic monthly donation. You set the amount, $1 minimum, over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast. And then we got some lovely notes of gratitude and encouragement from Chris T, Chris H, John, Brad, and Bertrand. Thank you all so much for those notes. Check out Bertrand's podcast, if you understand French, of course. That's the Design Quebec podcast that he's doing now on a monthly basis. I want to give John a thanks for attempting to give us a movie code, but region locks from the UK prevented us from doing that. So really nice for everybody to begin giving us that support. Big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. So, for AVRant and on behalf of Tom Andry, I am Marb H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.